Today, I'm talking about a crime which made global headlines a few years ago, a case I covered as a television journalist. We're talking about the parachute murder plot. This is an absolutely incredible, twisty, turny crime story of an upstanding army sergeant who led a dark, debaucherous double life, who tried to kill his wife Victoria not once but twice in the most outlandish ways possible. This is a story about his victim's miraculous survival, a drop from 4,000 feet. It's about how his victim had been so manipulated by him that she refused to believe he was responsible. She refused to believe the police, so she defended him in court. And it's about a small team of detectives who knew from the outset that he, Emile Cilliers, was responsible, but there was little proof, no forensics, no CCTV, nor DNA. A circumstantial case. They struggled to prove it, and my God, they worked hard to prove it as well. It is now the subject of a new 3-part Channel 4 docudrama series, which is airing in June 2024 in the UK. It will also be, I understand, on Amazon Prime at some point soon, and I've produced an 8-part podcast about this series as well. And one of the detectives who features in both the films and the podcast series is the brilliant Maddy Hennah. Maddy, looking good. How are you?
There's an introduction. My gosh, no pressure, nothing to live up to.
What's it like seeing this back on the screen in the docudrama, seeing not just yourself being interviewed, but an actress playing you at some of these key parts of this incredible case that was yours?
It's really fascinating, actually. The case, as you say, was massive at the time. And it has never really gone away. It's never really left my life because people want to talk about it, want to know more about it. So there's always been something going on in relation to the case over the past 9 years since it began, 4, 5, 6 years since obviously he was found guilty at court. But so it's never really gone away. But to then have the docudrama, I think is the icing on the cake. You know, it was a very surreal experience. Seeing who they pick to play you is always interesting. I had hoped for Sandra Bullock, but I believe she was busy. So, but Melanie Gutteridge did a fabulous job. So.
She did. I watched it again last night, and I think Story Films and Channel 4 have done a brilliant job. It's a great show.
They've really done it justice and really got the story over. And because, of course, ultimately this is about coercive control, and they have done a great job at raising the profile of just that.
Exactly. So we're going to talk a bit about the case first of all, and then we're going to move on to some of that. So just take us back to when you first had your first interaction, when you took the call, when you got involved, because you were at the time a detective constable. Where were you? What were you doing? What was your working life like, and what happened when you took the call?
So at the time I was a detective constable, I was on CID based in Salisbury. We were a very small team, as most CID teams are and were. I had a big caseload of work. We deal with a number of incidents, each of us individually as officers. And I believe I had probably about 12 other cases in my workload at that time, and that could be anything from a GBH to a sexual assault or a rape or a stalking or something. So I had a lot of other things going on at the same time. It was the bank holiday Monday, and we received a phone call actually into the office, and this was from Mark Byarder at the Parachute Centre, and he wanted to tell us that he had an incident that he was not happy with. He just wasn't comfortable to deal with it themselves, and they thought that police ought to be aware. So that really was the first time that we had that call. And that same evening, I went over to Netheravon, and so began my foray into the world of skydiving.
And what were the outline details about what had happened?
So he told us that there had been a jump the previous day, it was on the Sunday, and that something had happened, and one of the jumpers had fallen 4,000 feet, and both her main parachute and her reserve parachute had failed to open properly. However, she had survived. But he said that when he collected the parachute to take it back to the centre, he was unhappy about some of the things that he saw on that parachute.
How lucky was she to have survived the fall?
It was miraculous. I think whoever nature was looking after her that day for sure. She was very slim, so she was very, very tiny, which meant she was light. The actual act of the parachutes not opening properly put her into a spin, so the centrifugal force had put her into a spin, so she was actually spinning when she hit the ground. And she also avoided landing on a road by about 15 feet and landed in a newly ploughed field, which meant that her landing was much softer than it would have been. So it was miraculous, and all these things came together to mean that she survived.
So you understand, you learn her identity, Victoria Cilliers. She goes off to hospital where she's been treated. And in the meantime, you're learning about parachuting, aren't you? What do you know about parachuting at the time?
Yes, no, I had never even seen a parachute before in my life, to be honest, not up close anyway. So that evening I went to Netheravon Parachute Centre, having had a long day at work already, but when a job comes in and you have to attend. And Mark Bayarder taught me in a very condensed length of time, taught me as much as he could about the incident, what had happened, why he was uncomfortable with it. And I scooped up everything around it. I scooped up parachutes, I scooped up paperwork, and headed back to the station. And that was my first sort of leap into this case.
So that was sent off to the British Parachuting Association, and they said it had been tampered with, didn't they? Is that right?
Well, they didn't say that per se. They said that there was no mechanical reason why it had failed, and that in actual fact there were two slinks. Slinks are it's a very strong nylon that's used to hold the parachute and the lines to the backpack, and two of these on one side had been missing. And they said that there was no mechanical reason why they should be missing. They would not have come undone. They would not have broken. So it was really them saying this was not a mechanical fault. They at no point said this has been tampered with. That was down to us to then do our further investigations and come up with that.
And at what point did you start then looking at Victoria's husband? What was that? Because you took a phone call. Was that the first time, or was there a moment before then that he was sort of on the scene?
No, I think really prior to that, we were still learning about skydiving and parachutes and how they work, the mechanics of it all. And then I think it was about a week and a half later, a friend of Victoria's phoned into the police to say that she was not happy with the situation, as she knew that there was unrest, shall we say, in the marriage between Victoria and Emile. And she just wanted to voice her concerns, because I think she felt that if she didn't say anything and it was connected to that, then she would never have forgiven herself.
And what was it like for you to take that call, to get this out of the blue? You know, you're looking at this quite technical side of things here with parachutes and things. You're probably trying to get your head around that. But here is something that's quite, it's extraordinarily close to home and very personal about the victim.
Yes, I think it was interesting is probably the best word I can use for it. To sort of think, this clearly wasn't a mechanical error, and I think we probably started to think, well, if this wasn't mechanical and this was done on purpose, who, what, when, where, why? So of course, when I received this phone call and you start to have some meat put around the bones, you start thinking, well, there's a potential who there. We need to look at this a bit closer. It actually took me, I think it was nearly another couple of weeks to get the statement from her friend, because she was based away from Wiltshire and we couldn't quite coordinate our times to get together for the statement. And you can't really do anything until you've got a statement, until it's written down in black and white. So when I eventually managed to take the statement from her, which was a lot more in depth and a lot more detail to it, that was when we sat down and thought, yeah, we need to look at this a bit closer.
Was that the point you decided to arrest Cilliers?
It was. The decision was made that actually we needed to get him in and speak to him in a more formal context, because at that point we had suspicions, and once you have a suspicion, you have sufficient to go and arrest somebody and talk to them about it.
Just tell me about the arrest. So you arrested him, didn't you, on where he worked? He was an army sergeant, but he was a physical training instructor, wasn't he? Just talk us briefly through the arrest process and the arrest for attempted murder.
So he was based in Camberley in Surrey. So I went over with a colleague. We spoke to obviously counterparts at Camberley in order for them to enable us to go and find him. And we went to his office, and his office was next to the gymnasium. And he had a massive glass window on the side of his office, which looked out onto the gymnasium. And obviously there were soldiers in there going about their physical training business. And I went into the office and I asked him to sit down and said I had to talk to him about something, and asked him to sit down. And then I went through the arrest and the necessity, telling him I was arresting him on the suspicion of attempting to murder his wife. And he just sat there and he just looked at me and he didn't say anything, which was probably my first alarm bell with Emile, thinking that's not a reaction I would expect. Were you arrested on suspicion of trying to murder your partner, I'm sure you would make some protestations, but he didn't. He didn't say anything. And interestingly, at the end of our first interview with him, the only thing he was concerned about was that he'd been arrested in front of his subordinates, as he called them, the chaps in the gym who potentially could have seen what